On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. We are the official podcast of the Lot 1 Tailgate Party, which is at Lambeau Field every home game. This is episode 91, created November 11th, 2024. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
It is November. There is a chill in the air, and I am having a Frost Beer Works Little Lush IPA.
Hello, gentlemen. Tonight from Central Waters Brewing, I'm having Cherry Kringle Stout.
All right. And the beverage I put together is called a White Monk. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat. And just the audio is available on Apple Podcast as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Well, it's the bye week. It's mid-season, week 10. We have a few things to look at in our mid-season predictions. It's time, guys, to get your story straight on how you thought the season was going to go. But on top of that, it is Bears week. It's finally getting into the second half of the season, the first time we'll see the Chicago Bears, and we'll get a little bit of Packers Bears history to go with that. But really, how did you celebrate your bye week? Did you do anything exciting this weekend, Neil?
I was watching the Arsenal in New York City with some friends of mine, including an Arsenal season ticket holder, and very much enjoying not watching bad football on Sunday.
I did the latter. I watched bad football and punched myself in the nuts for most of the day, actually.
Yeah, Jeff and I jumped on that grenade for you, Neil. We saw some bad football on Sunday, yes.
So I guess we should talk about the bad football, right? You guys watched it, so maybe you can start out.
Let me give you some lowlights. So I watched the Vikings-Jaguars game. The Vikings won with a rookie kicker counting for all their points, all 12 points, didn't score a touchdown, had over 400 yards of offense, and the Jaguars had a touchdown and lost.
Right. No touchdowns, 0 for 5 in the red zone, and Sam Darnold throwing 3 interceptions. So really, grand scheme of things, Jeff, it was a dismal day for the Vikings, but somehow they eked out this 12-7 win because Jacksonville just couldn't put anything together.
No Trevor Lawrence, no offense. It was atrocious.
Right. Yeah, if they had any offense at all, they would have taken a victory away from the Vikings.
That's right. And that leaves the Vikings at a 7-2 record, just right behind the Detroit Lions.
Sure, second in the division, and Detroit with another game that they're trailing 23-7 at halftime over the Houston Texans in the all-red uniforms. And Houston, again, in the second half, just could not do anything with the football when they had it. They gave up 16 points in the second half and 3 points in the overtime to lose that game 26-23.
Well, and unlike against the Packers, where basically the Lions were mistake-free, Goff threw 5 interceptions, John and Neil. 5. And they still won this game. So does this mean
3 in overtime?
Yeah. Is this team sort of the team of destiny because they can't lose?
No, a team that is so prone to making mistakes when they need to actually do something is not a team of destiny. And I am looking forward to future iterations of this team.
With the Detroit Lions, like I said, going into the Packer game, this is a team that is peaking mid-season. They peaked in the 2 weeks prior to the Packer game. They get a win against Green Bay. They barely get this win against Houston. They'll hold on. I think they'll hold on and make the postseason. They could possibly still win the division. But with them peaking now, it's not going to last throughout the rest of this season.
Although alternatively, you could have said that they had their Murphy's Law game against a very, very good Texans defense. And, to be fair, one of those interceptions at least was a Hail Mary at the end of the half that you don't really care. It was not even a long punt. It was a completely pointless on the stat sheet as it counting as an interception.
Neil standing up for a quarterback saying there should be a special category for Hail Mary interceptions. Mark that one down, Jeff.
It is. You're going for the win. That is a no-lose interception as far as I'm concerned. But as far as the other game that we care about, as far as the NFC North is concerned, the Chicago Bears against the New England Patriots, Bears losing 19-3. But what can you say about Caleb Williams? I mean, Caleb Williams had 3 fewer interceptions than Sam Darnold. He had 5 fewer interceptions than Jared Goff. I mean, Caleb Williams is clearly the class of the rest of the NFC North as far as quarterbacking, right?
What are you smoking?
Well, with 9 offensive possessions and just 8 punts, I think that Chicago has really found their
They found their
groove, right?
rhythm.
Yeah. Picking up a field goal. Chicago having a rough season. In 10 games, Chicago has not scored first in any of those 10 games. And in those 10 games, in the first quarter, they have one game with a field goal and their game in week 5 with a touchdown. All of the other 8 games, no points in the first quarter.
I think one of the things that's amazing about this Bears stat line against New England, first of all, again, New England being a terrible team, is that Caleb Williams, 16 of 30, not an atrocious line, but only for 120 yards. But the big number in that game, 9 sacks for 51 yards. And so net on 39 dropbacks, Caleb Williams had 69 net passing yards,
Nice.
1.8 yards per drop back for Caleb Williams and the Bears. That is atrocious offense, truly offensive offense, as it were.
Yeah. And Caleb Williams infamously now texted his rookie punter and said, hey, you're not going to be punting very much around here, whatever. The punter has more yards than Caleb Williams does. So things are not real positive for the Bears with this weekend coming up. Are we kind of rubbing our hands together here? We thinking,
yes, you are, but with this Packers team, you always do this cautiously. Hey, the Bears haven't scored first all season. Well, what's going to happen on Sunday? Right? The Bears are going to score first. Bears have had 10 total points in the first quarter this season. Green Bay has notoriously started slow this year in that first quarter. Yes, they'll pick up in the second quarter and in the second half, but it's one of those things where Chicago is going to have some hope because they may be able to just put something on the board in the first quarter. And the last thing we need is Bears fans and hope going together in the same sentence, right?
I mean, the thing is, they have won 4 games. It's not like they're a 2-8 team or anything like that. Of course, their 4 wins were against the Titans, the Rams when they had no players that were healthy, the Panthers, and the Jaguars. So that's not exactly beating a murderer's row, but they are a team that has won some games. But I think one of the takeaways that people had about that Bears Patriots game is that the Bears players seem to have almost given up on Matt Eberflus.
the effort down the stretch. I mean, it didn't help that a bunch of the offensive linemen were out and injuries and things like that. But you know what? It's midseason, so most teams have certainly injuries, and they're playing players that didn't start in the beginning of the year, things like that. It's how the team adapts, and it just seems like this team has not moved forward. To John, to your point, like with the Lions, I think maybe Chicago peaked in like week 2. I mean, they were 4-2 back a few weeks ago. So these last few weeks have been pretty atrocious. And yeah, it does appear that the players are just sort of giving up. Lots of infighting. They don't know who maybe is going to be playing the calls. I think Eberflus is going to stick around, but this is not a healthy team. So can the Packers, with their bye week to prepare for the Bears, can we really take advantage here? I certainly hope so, but you're right. I do not want to see the Bears even close to being in this game.
Well, that's certainly an advantage the Packers have because LaFleur has been excellent coming off his bye weeks. But the whole talk this year was Caleb Williams coming in as a quarterback, and some of his numbers are not atrocious. He's 60% completion. He's basically at the same place Jordan Love is. But you add up all of the other things that aren't working, and he's got 54 more passing attempts than Jordan Love, but has 60 fewer passing yards, only 6.1 yards per attempt for Caleb Williams. Again, he's got those greater number of passing attempts, but he's got 6 fewer touchdown passes, and he has been sacked 38 times on the season, as opposed to 7 sacks for Jordan Love. And again, Jordan did miss 2.5 games, but still 38 times sacked on the season for Caleb Williams.
The dismal numbers for Chicago as well, Jeff, as you mentioned, they were 4-2 going into the bye week. So that is where they peaked. Week 7 is their bye week. Since then, coming out of the bye, in week 8, 15 points against Washington, 9 points against Arizona, and as you mentioned, that paltry 3 points against the Patriots. So, Neil, it gets worse, doesn't it, is the phrase that we like to hear.
It just gets worse, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the offensive numbers for the Packers versus the Bears, the Packers are 3rd in yards per game at 391. The Bears are 30th at only 278. Passing yards per game, Packers 7th, Bears 30th again. Rushing, the Packers are third, Bears 24th. So they're not quite as bad at running the ball, but 24th is not anything to write home about. And if you look at additional passing numbers for these two teams, the Packers are first in the NFL at allowing only 12 sacks on the season. The Bears 31st with that 38 number. And rushing yards per attempt for offense, the Packers first at 5 yards per attempt, the Bears 28th at only 4 yards per attempt. These are two teams that are very, very different on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, offense doesn't always win games. Do you have some defense? How do the defenses stack up? Since something the Bears have got to hang their hat somewhere, is their defense at least a little better?
The defensive numbers are truly average. And the problem is the Packers' defensive numbers are fairly average as well. So yards per game, the Packers and Bears are essentially tied at 12th and 13th. Passing yards per game, the Bears are actually 8th in the NFL, allowing only 190 passing yards per game to 15th for the Packers. Rushing yards per game, however, the Bears are 23rd. So clearly opportunities there. And sacks as far as both teams. The Packers and the Bears both are fairly middling as far as the number of sacks for their defenses. 22nd for the Packers with 18, only 15 sacks for that Bears defense. And the Bears defense also is allowing 4.8 rushing yards per attempt. That is 28th in the NFL. The one possible bright stop, if you're going to squint at these Bears numbers, is that as far as opposing quarterback rating, the Bears are second in the NFL. Their opposing quarterbacks are 77.4, but they have faced some truly atrocious quarterbacks. And so the question, how much of that is really due to the competition that they've faced?
You're right, Neil. They've played some really craptastic quarterbacks, and now they're facing a good quarterback in Jordan Love. And I think he's certainly poised for success.
Even Jordan Love or Malik Willis would be a good quarterback against this Chicago team. I think even if Malik ends up in there and we run a running game like we saw previously. But yeah, you talk about all the things that are going wrong in Chicago. And, if you spend too much time online listening to Bears fans online, you really understand that, boy, these people are miserable, right? I mean, they're ready to burn everything down. And to me, okay, I get it. Maybe Eberflus calls a bad game. Yeah, you probably want to get a different coach in there for your rookie quarterback. But I wasn't prepared to run Justin Fields out of town had I been a Bears fan. Same thing. I'm 10 games in. Are you ready to hang up on Caleb Williams? You put so much into your belief on this quarterback. And I always come back to saying you're not going to get a rookie quarterback who is going to set the world on fire. There's too much pressure, especially for the number one overall pick. You look at Troy Aikman in his rookie season. You look at Peyton Manning in his rookie season. They knew going into the season they were going to fail. But what the teams did in those cases is they prepared the fans for the failure. And they said, just hang out with us because these guys are good and they're going to get better. But, the ownership in Chicago and the PR team, they can't do that. They just won't do that. And that's what's causing this failure. This is great. This is going to be a great season. Well, no, it's not turning out to be a great season. You need to do some damage control along the way, or you're just going to really lose the fan base and it's going to get even uglier.
Or counterpoint, John, they picked the wrong quarterback. And if they would have picked Jaden Daniels, things might be different.
Isn't that the conversation, Jeff? Yes.
I don't know about that. I mean, Jaden Daniels obviously has played really well last week, notwithstanding. But there is the thing that Bears teams do to their quarterbacks, and the Eberflus offense is not something that is setting Caleb Williams up for success. I think it is far too early to give up on Caleb Williams. I mean, I hope the Bears do. Please, God bless them. Let them do that. But I think having an offense that is so poorly set up for their quarterback, and one of the statistics I saw is that they only ran 2 play action passes in that game against New England. They're basically play calling to get their quarterback killed. Well, you're not going to have success when you're play calling like that. It's just dumb. And yes, they are probably not going to fire Eberflus in the season, but they've got to fire him basically on the first possible moment after the season is done, because this is not setting your team up for success. Now, again, as a Packers fan, I hope they don't do that. I hope they're as dumb as possible. But if you want the Bears to be competitive, it's got to be different.
Right. It's finding the right system. And we look at, Green Bay had a system set up to allow Favre and Rodgers to succeed. Now Love is succeeding. And again, even to Malik Willis's point, coming in and playing well. Look at Sam Darnold in Minnesota. Here's a guy who's bounced around everywhere, now is in a system that has been working for him at least through the first half of the season. Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford switched teams, and that change of scenery, and both of them are succeeding. Stafford had the earlier success, and now Goff coming around in Detroit. It's a matter of having the right system, but you also have to have a general manager. You have to have ownership. You have to have people that understand football operations that are going to bring in the right team to build up your talent.
So what you're saying is, as long as Ryan Poles is in charge, Packers fans are going to be happy here.
Right. And it's unfortunate for Chicago fans that they are going to waste away some talent that they have there.
You know what? This is a Packers podcast.
That's right. But it's Bears week. It's Bears week, Jeff.
It's, you know what? We can, yeah. Let's talk about the Packers, or let's talk about where we're going.
At least we didn't go full Swirsky on our Bears love this week, right?
We did mention Jordan Love's stats, but I just want to do a little bit more talking about where the Packers are midseason statistically. And it does stand in contrast with what the Bears have, but Jordan Love, despite having some ups and downs, including due to injuries so far in the season, is still averaging 7.6 yards per attempt on the season. That's good. 15 touchdowns is excellent. It's sixth in the NFL. And given that he's missed 2.5 games, is superb. And then look at our running game. Josh Jacobs is up to 762 rushing yards on the season with 8 games to go. This is going to be a huge final number for Josh Jacobs on the year for running. And then we talk about our multi-headed monster at receiver and Jayden Reed. There have been a number of games where he said he's been kind of quiet. Jayden Reed is 10th in the NFL with 620 receiving yards on the season. So even though these passes are being distributed, unlike last year, we are having players put up numbers that are much higher than they were last year, and sort of continuing as far as people that might be on a trajectory towards possibly hitting 1,000 yards. Neither of these is guaranteed to make it right now, but Dobbs is at 412 yards, Kraft at 376. I could definitely see a few big games pushing those people towards the 1,000-yard receiving mark as well. And again, we had these games with Malik Willis where we were definitely not passing a whole lot. So it's a very statistically encouraging season that really talks about how at some key positions, we are absolutely a better team this year than we were last year, because of the development of some of these players or the offseason signing of Josh Jacobs. And if Josh Jacobs did not have to deal with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley having all world types of seasons, everyone would be talking about what a huge signing Josh Jacobs was and how he's lighting the Packers and the NFL on fire. We just have these two people that are doing so well that it doesn't seem to be noticed, but these are spectacular numbers for Josh Jacobs.
And with the season now getting into winter, late fall, sloppy games, if the Packers, hopefully the rest of the offense can hang onto the damn ball if the weather's inclement. But the point is that this is running weather we're coming into. Cold weather, things like that. And if Jacobs has already established that he's been able to do so well and the offensive line can really block for him and the tight ends and the wide receivers downfield, that boy, these last 8 weeks could be just a feast for Mr. Jacobs.
Let's not hang our hat too much on the weather phenomenon in the Lambeau Mystique, because remember, we expected last week to be the better team in the rain against the dome team, and that one didn't pan out either. They're all still professional athletes. They are ready to play the game. I'm not going to take that away from anyone weather-wise, but yes, you have to acknowledge at some point that you live and you work in Green Bay, Wisconsin. You play in an outdoor stadium. You've got 4 home games yet this year, with one in December, one in January, that you better be prepared for some inclement weather. With that said, Neil, here's your weather forecast for Sunday in Chicago. Cloudy and 57 degrees. That's football weather, no matter how you cut it.
It's going to be good, and there are going to be no excuses for the Packers in Chicago. They have to perform. They've got to show that they have put that Detroit game behind them and they're ready for a stretch run.
And if you're planning to go to Chicago for the game now, up until last week, a lot of the ticket prices were probably close to double face value in most spots. It was a minimum $300 to get you in the door. Now, Chicago, they do the tiered pricing based on the opponent. So they know that the Packer game, those tickets are typically a higher face value. And just taking a quick look at the secondary market, that's about where they're coming down to. You're looking at right around $200. Now, I saw the ticket prices started to drop right after that game on Sunday against the Patriots. checking it again here on Monday. They have come down considerably since yesterday. If you're planning on going to the game, keep your eye on the ticket prices because they look like they are just going to keep dropping. Weather's not going to be a factor, but the fact that I don't think Bears fans want to go and sit in that stadium to watch this game.
The Bears-Packers rivalry has been around for more than 100 years. So many memorable games we've seen. They play twice a year. We've seen lots of them. I want to draw your attention to one specifically, though. Bears-Packers, November 12th, 1995. The Packers suffered a humiliating loss the week before to the Minnesota Vikings. Worse than the loss was the fact that both Brett Favre and Reggie White had sustained injuries that would sideline most players for weeks. Favre had suffered a severely sprained ankle, and this was the TJ Rubley game. With the Packers at 5-4 on the season, it seemed that TJ Rubley would be forced to start against the 6-3 Bears. This was not a recipe for success. White's injury was perhaps more serious as he had suffered a sprained MCL and faced missing a month or more. With the team badly needing a win to avoid a 3-game losing streak, both White and Favre played the game. Favre had perhaps one of his best performances of his Hall of Fame career. After having barely practiced all week, his left ankle was heavily taped. He led the Packers to an inspirational 35-28 win over the Bears. He was 25 of 33 for 336 yards and a career-high 5 touchdowns. White managed to finish with that sprained MCL with 4 tackles and a half sack. The win by the Packers was a turning point for both teams that season. Including the playoffs, the Packers won 7 of their next 9 games, losing to the eventual Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys 38-27 in the NFC Championship game at Texas Stadium. The Bears, however, won just 3 of their final 6 games and missed the playoffs by 1 game.
And that 95 season, Jeff, ends in the magical Yancey Thigpen game. All you have to do to Packer fans is say Yancey Thigpen, and everybody knows where they were in December of 95.
The Christmas surprise, yes, when he dropped it in the end zone. But there was all kinds of memorable games. So like I said, this is the one where Favre had no business even barely playing.
Oh, yeah.
And White should have been out for a month. And they both came back, and it was inspirational. And this team, took off from there. I mean, this was the pivotal game against the Bears. A had to have it game.
I mean, we should have a swear jar for any time we say somebody like TJ Rubley, but I mean, that was so depressing. And I remember the fear leading up to this Bears game that, oh shit, the Packers are completely screwed because we don't have Favre and we don't have a competent backup who's going to be able to do this. This season that started off very well, potentially is going to go off the rails really, really quickly.
The other thing, Jeff, to say that Favre's ankle was heavily taped kind of adds to the legend. I mean, by all accounts that week, his ankle was swollen to the size of a basketball. For him to be able to move under any circumstances was nothing short of a miracle that week. But you're absolutely right. It was sheer willpower between both Favre and Reggie White to perform, not just perform in that game, but to perform at a level of one of their best games for each of them.
Yeah, and I mean, the Bears were in contention for the division title, and Packers said, nope, not on our watch. They both played extremely well and basically snatched division from the Bears at that point.
That's another time in history, though, too, when we were looking at the overall series between the Packers and the Bears and wondering if we would in our lifetime see the Packers take over the Bears in wins, and realizing, well, we'll have to be in our 50s when that happens. And sure enough, it did. And now here we are in our 50s, really enjoying the surge, not just in the all-time series rivalry, but then when you look at all-time wins for franchises in the league, Green Bay overtakes Chicago there as well. And yeah, it's a lot more fun this way than it was growing up in the 70s and 80s, I would say. Short of the Chester Markle game, right? This has been pretty fun.
The other thing about that game against the Bears is this was the year of Brett Favre's first MVP, and you have to assume that Brett Favre's will to play and then play at that high level played a huge role as far as building momentum for his first MVP.
It showed just the passion, and this is why he was so popular. I mean, he was good, but he just had this otherworldly, but No, I don't know if anybody else could have played through that. And the fact that he had one of his best games statistically of his career, 5 touchdown passes.
It's the romanticism of tough guy football.
Yeah.
Guys, when they used to play without helmets or helmets without face masks, or just how strong the Packers teams of the 60s were. And to realize that there was a lot of frailty in the 80s, and to get not just a player, but a quarterback who is going to play through injury and carry a team on his shoulders. This was, again, it is the legend of Brett Favre. It is something that Green Bay hadn't seen in well over 20 years. And as these stories grow, they grow in their mystique and in their legendary status.
But equally as impressive, Reggie White playing on the other side of the ball too.
Right.
And that just endeared him to everyone. Again, I mean, there's no way a sprained MCL, we've talked about this and what that means and how it feels and whatever. How is he out there as a defensive lineman and he gets 4 tackles and a half sack? Doesn't miss any playing time. So that just absolutely, but a catalyst for springboarding this team to much greater things, not only that year, but in the years to come as well.
Right. 96, 97, of course. Yes. But sure, when you're winning, those legends, those stories get even sweeter and greater every time they get told.
And this is the great thing about a rivalry as old as Packers Bears, is that we have names of players that we can just say the name of the player and we know exactly what Packers Bears games we're talking about, whether it's Chester Markle, Don Mikowski, Robert Brooks, BJ Raji, or Randall Cobb. And obviously so many other games where you can just say one name or one event and you know what happened. That's the magic of Packers Bears week.
All right. And it sounds like an assignment for you, Jeff, for the last game of the season when we have the Chicago coming into town. All right, gentlemen, time to get your story straight. We are in the middle of the season. We made our season predictions before the season started. Let's take a quick kind of breakdown of where the season is right now. If the playoffs were today, people would be saying, why is this January? No, if the playoffs happened today, it would be in the AFC, working down 1 through 7, Chiefs, Bills, Steelers, Texans, and then Ravens, Chargers, Broncos. In the NFC, it would be Lions, Eagles, Falcons, Cardinals, Vikings, Commanders, Packers. Let's start in the AFC. Jeff, how do your original picks match up to where we are now?
Well, for division winners, not terrible. For wild cards, atrocious. I had Jets, Cincy, and Titans. That's not pretty. All those teams have vastly underperformed. Cincy, maybe still has a chance. I had the Ravens number 1, Chiefs 2, so good there. Dolphins, I don't know if they're going to be able to claw their way back. But I did have the Texans sort of in the middle of the pack. So not terrible, but man, the wild cards, yeah, not so much.
Awful. But I guess that's the nature of a wild card, right? Is that those are teams that have obvious flaws. And so that's where you're most likely going to make your mistakes. So I picked Buffalo over Kansas City in the AFC Championship game and Kansas City over Baltimore previously. That all looks good. I also picked Houston to win their division. Yeah, I got Jacksonville as one of my picks for the wild card along with Miami and Cincinnati.
And in the AFC for me right now, I've got Kansas City and the Chargers correct as far as the AFC West, both in the 1 and 6 seed. Buffalo I had up there. Baltimore I had up there. I do have Houston winning the AFC South. But the two that I got completely wrong, at least where we are right now, Denver and Pittsburgh, I picked each of those teams to have 3 wins this season, and they're actually going to be in playoff contention here. But I think for all of us, you nailed it. Miami is the team that has definitely underperformed, but that's injury, right? That is injury to your main player, and a team that you watch them play, and that defense, the amount of speed and the way that defense plays should be playing so much better for Miami, and they just are not pulling it together on either side of the ball right now.
The AFC is kind of a weird situation right now because, as you said, Denver is 5-5, which is the 7 seed, but that actually means that teams that are below 5-5 are not in such bad shape. So Cincinnati is at 4-6. They're only 1 game out of the playoffs right now. And given the way Joe Burrow has been playing, given the way that Jamar Chase has been playing, this is a team that certainly you can't count them out. And I'd go even so far as to say the Jets are not completely out of it yet. Now, I don't think they're going to recover. I think they look atrocious. I think they completely lack any semblance of leadership. But at 3-7, they are only 2 games out of the playoffs right now, and they've got a very manageable schedule for the rest of the season. Again, I don't think they're going to do it, but there are a lot more teams that are in contention in the AFC because basically the AFC is very top heavy, and then there are a whole bunch of teams that are sitting there in the middle.
What surprises me the most is how strong the AFC West is. And you got the Chiefs that are undefeated, but you have both the Chargers and Denver that are competing. So the question, I think, is how many games ultimately is Kansas City going to lose? And are they going to be overtaken by Buffalo or even Pittsburgh coming up here? I know there's a huge showdown next weekend between Kansas City and Buffalo, which could kind of reset the table here. But Kansas City's not dominating. They're just doing sort of like the Lions. They're doing just enough to get by to win. It's ugly. It's brutal to watch sometimes. It is not quality, but the end of the day, they have more points than the other team.
They've got the best quarterback and they've got one of the best coaches. But the thing about Kansas City is they're not only living on the edge, but they've got a really rough schedule. They've got essentially 2 easy games. They've got at Buffalo, and the Buffalo team and the Buffalo fans are going to be highly motivated. They play the Clippers, they play the Texans, they play at Pittsburgh, and they play at Denver. I don't see there to be any significant chance of them going 17-0, and I could see them taking 4 losses within that group. This is a team that, in the end, they know that they're motivated for what happens in the postseason, and I think that they're not playing for the sense of history of going to the first undefeated team since 1972. They know where they want to go. And I think the fact that they're not fully motivated, given that they've won the last 2 Super Bowls, they're not fully motivated to play at their very best in the regular season is something that is making their margin of victory perhaps not as impressive as it could be.
And this is really what Kansas City did last season as well, right? They seemed underwhelming, underperforming, disinterested right through the regular season, and then they poured it on in the postseason. And as we know, they took the Super Bowl. And taking a look at what my predictions were, I've got Kansas City and Baltimore in that AFC Championship game, which could just as easily be Kansas City and Buffalo as well. Either way, I'm going to stick with Kansas City in the Super Bowl on my prediction there.
I mean, this is the thing. There are 3 teams that are truly spectacular in the AFC. And yes, I know that Detroit has a lot of bandwagon, but I think the 3 best teams in the NFL are still those teams in the AFC of Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore. They have been impressive all year, and they're all basically building towards the crescendo of the playoffs. But I think that is why Buffalo really feels the chip on its shoulder that they have to overcome that Kansas City team when they've got that chance at home, because come January, they want to be playing at home against Kansas City. They don't want to be going to Arrowhead. And there's so many parts that are coming together. And Josh Allen has been the best quarterback in the NFL so far this season. Yes, they've got some deficiencies on their team, but they have been doing all of the little things that is moving them towards becoming that team that goes to the Super Bowl, displacing Kansas City, at least for a season.
And I want to talk just very briefly about the Ravens. I think Lamar Jackson takes this team as far as they go, because he has not had success in the postseason for a variety of reasons. And the 2 quarterbacks that he would have to beat are Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And these are quarterbacks that have had massive success and are built for the postseason. So for the Ravens and Lamar Jackson to overcome those 2 quarterbacks, it's really going to take something special. I had the Ravens in the Super Bowl representing the AFC. So I thought he would make the jump through 10 games so far. They're 7-3. He's had some phenomenal games. He's had a couple head scratchers. So I think that all of the teams we've picked are in play. Certainly, that this is the class of the AFC. All of them have a legitimate shot, and it's going to be very exciting to see how this plays out.
But the one thing that Lamar Jackson has that none of these other teams have is Derrick Henry. And he is a real X factor because of how incredible he has been on this season. And I'm going to stand by my pick of Buffalo. But yeah, I think that the team that has the most parts that they can put together are those Baltimore Ravens. I think that you can see no obvious weaknesses with the Ravens in contrast to either Kansas City or Buffalo.
All right, we're sticking with our AFC representation in the Super Bowl in Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore. Very interesting. Jeff, let's go back to those NFC numbers then. Once again, the Lions on top right now with the 1 seed, going all the way down to our Green Bay Packers at the number 7 seed. Take a look at what your picks for the season were in the NFC.
Not too bad. The NFC West, I was totally off. I had San Francisco and the Rams. Both teams are close, but Arizona is the only representative there currently. The NFC South is still bad. The Falcons, they're their playoff seed from there. The NFC North currently has the 3 teams represented, and then Philly and the Commanders, and I had Dallas. So not too far off there. Like I said, NFC West, I still think is up for grabs. I don't think Arizona is probably going to close the deal. I think they're going to get caught. They'll have something weird happen with Christian McCaffrey back for San Francisco. I think that just makes them that much better. So they will find a way because they're close. They're nipping on Arizona's heels. But Dallas has been a massive, obviously, disappointment, but also kind of a surprise at how bad this team really is. Again, the injury bug here has really affected them. But I think there's going to be, at this point, a massive shakeup. I think this is McCarthy and his staff. This is their last year under contract. I think things are going to change drastically at Jerry's world after this season if McCarthy and the coaching staff even lasts throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, but Jerry's stuck with that same crappy general manager he's had for the last several decades, so that's not going to help him. Success for me as far as my picks, I had Detroit as the 1 seed, the Packers as a wild card. I had Atlanta winning their division because being just slightly above average is a perfect Kirk Cousins year. I had the Packers beating San Francisco in the championship game. I also had the Eagles winning. I'm going to ignore Dallas and Chicago's picks because, well, the Chicago pick, to be fair, looked good a couple weeks ago, but I would not stand by that right now. But Arizona, I think, is an interesting case because last year, there was a lot of talk about the Arizona Cardinals giving up on Kyler Murray, which I thought was completely insane. And clearly it would have been insane, but there was talk about them picking quarterbacks. And this just gets to the statement that we were talking about earlier. You can't give up on a quarterback too early because if they've got the part up here that's going to be able, they've got the arm, you can coach them to the point that they are going to be successful. And for Kyler Murray, though, as much as anything, he's got a moxie about him. He's got a way that he carries himself that all great quarterbacks have to have. And I'm not calling him a great quarterback yet, but certainly Arizona's success is not something I predicted, but I'm not entirely shocked by Arizona's success because every time I've watched Kyler Murray, I've been impressed by him. And I agree with you, Jeff. I think San Francisco is a wild card as far as the season is concerned. The only thing that I would say about San Francisco is that they have an absolutely brutal remaining schedule. Seattle, at Green Bay, at Buffalo, Chicago, the Rams, at Miami, Detroit, and finishing San Francisco at Arizona. I see 2 easy wins within there, and then a whole lot of things that might be really, really challenging for a team that's trying to find its footing. Let's just say this straight up. The Packers need to knock off San Francisco because that's going to reduce the odds that we have to play them in the postseason, and I'm still terrified of playing San Francisco in the postseason. Let's beat them in 2 weeks and not have to worry about that.
What San Francisco has going for them, is proving right now that, yeah, one player can make your team and your season. This is a team that has struggled through the first half of the season due to injury. Christian McCaffrey is back. So that gives San Francisco the chance to surge here late season. Taking a look at my picks, I think Minnesota is the anomaly here at the 5 seed. I think that they're going to regress to the mean, right, Neil? And they are probably going to drop off. Who would replace them, though? I don't know that Arizona stays in on top of the NFC West. San Francisco and or Seattle can come into that position. I had Atlanta in the NFC South. I think they're going to stay there. Philadelphia, obviously the class in the NFC East. Washington playing a lot better than what was expected, but Dallas just is a shambles. There's nothing really we can say positive about this team, and they are just sinking like a stone. The only thing different in my picks is I did have Green Bay winning the division with Detroit coming in second. Detroit is far surpassing, I think, expectations. I think there was a second season slump or something like that might have been expected in Detroit. And I keep saying they peaked at midseason, but I think that they'll still play well enough in the second half to hang on. So as far as my playoff predictions, I still like it coming down to Green Bay and Philadelphia in the NFC Championship team, with Green Bay avenging that week 1 loss and heading into the Super Bowl on my side, taking on Kansas City in New Orleans.
In contrast to the AFC, the NFC is kind of a weird situation in that there are paper tigers throughout the entire NFC. And the question that I have, is there any one team among those in the NFC that you actually trust? Yes, we've got a better overall record in the NFC, but Washington showed last week that despite having Jaden Daniels, they are a team that has the ability to not play particularly well. And again, Jaden Daniels is still a rookie quarterback. The one advantage that Washington has is that they have a really easy remaining schedule. They play at Philadelphia this upcoming weekend, but then they've got a whole bunch of terrible games. Realistically, there are only 3 games that are challenging or that should be challenging the rest of the year are at Philadelphia, Philadelphia at home, and Atlanta. They play Dallas twice. They play Tennessee. They play New Orleans. This is a team that is well set up that even if they're not perfect, they're set up to win the NFC East in a way that Philadelphia is not, because Philadelphia, in contrast, in addition to playing Washington this week, has to play at the Rams, at Baltimore, Pittsburgh, at Washington, and then they have a couple of easy games against the East to finish up. But there are more tough games remaining for Philadelphia than for Washington. This is a consequence of where they finished last season, and I have a feeling that Washington is going to still end up winning the East despite Philadelphia being a better team. Oh, and by the way, if you talk Eagles fans, they're really uniformly opposed to Nick Sirianni. They don't trust what he's doing. There is a lot of concern among Eagles fans, and that 7-2 record is something that Eagles fans themselves do not trust. Well, if Eagles fans don't trust that record, why should we?
Who's your team coming out of the NFC, Neil?
Green Bay. I'm staying with Green Bay.
I just want to make sure we're staying on the homer track. Jeff, who's your team coming out of the NFC?
I've got the Packers and the Lions in the NFC Championship, so I'm sticking with that, and Packers Ravens.
All right, so nothing really changes. We're on track. We like these picks up at the top, maybe a little bit at the bottom. You know, those teams that are going to sneak in on the wild card. There are a couple of teams, like we said, that are definitely underperforming, mostly injury related when we look at Miami and San Francisco, and then some teams like Pittsburgh and Denver who are overperforming. But that's just the way the league is. You know, any given Sunday is the cliche, and it's fun to watch. So we've got a lot of games left in this season as we are at the halfway point. It is Bears week as well, so we're getting ready to head to Chicago for that one. And with that, let's take us home. Neil, what are your final thoughts in the bye week?
All 3 of us picked the Packers to go to the Super Bowl. That's showing an exceptional level of confidence for a team that has been very up and down in the first half of the season. But one of the things about the season is that great teams go on a run where they find themselves. And we have not yet seen the best of this Green Bay Packers team. Whether it starts out with on the side of the youth, and we've got Reed, Kraft, and Musgrave, all in their second year in the NFL, all of them continuing to improve. Add that Watson and Dobbs are only in their 3rd year in the NFL. And then on the other side of the ball, staying with second-year players, Lucas Van Ness has been given a great deal of responsibility with the trade of Preston Smith. It is clear that Brian Gutekunst has confidence in Lucas Van Ness and other members of that team on the edge. And then add in an Evan Williams, a Javon Bullard, and Edgerrin Cooper, 3 rookies that we did not expect necessarily anything to come out of this year that are emerging as leaders on this team that are going to continue to get better with the additional experience. And that doesn't add our older players in Jair and especially in Jordan Love, players who have been missing a lot of this first half of the season, but players that we know and we've seen that have demonstrated that they can perform at the absolute highest level. I'm looking forward to the second half of this season. Go Pack, go.
With the current Bears team in disarray, a victory Sunday for the Packers off their bye week could serve as a catalyst, as you were saying, for a deep playoff run like in 1995. In addition, with the Packers' win streak against the Bears currently at 10 games, a victory on Sunday would also set the longest winning streak by either team in the history of this storied series. Go Pack, go.
And the NFL, again, using the month of November in their salute to service. Today, in fact, is Veterans Day.
John, thank you for your service.
Thank you for mentioning that, Neil. And again, to both of your fathers, Jeff, Bill in the Korean War and Joe during the Vietnam conflict. Thank you for their service. And to anybody listening, if you've served, you know someone who served. I always say for Veterans Day and things like this, it's nice to honor the people that have served or are serving, but remember the families as well. For my mom, it was probably one of the toughest days during the Gulf War when we went on to active duty, and we have to remember the families who stay behind as well. So a salute to them as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe, leave a comment. You can find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That is all one word, Green Bay Chat, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and on Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. And you can follow us on any or all of those social media platforms. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Right.